When I was 15 years old, I had a stroke. That stroke left me temporarily unable to speak. The cause of the stroke was a habitual, compulsive, self-adjusting of my own neck. Yes, cracking my cervical vertebrae over 100 times a day led to torn muscle tissue and inflammation which restricted blood flow to the brain. This caused a temporary loss of mobility and left me speechless. To be robbed of words when you desperately want to share the contents of your mind is a terrifying experience. And that's a gross understatement. Like when an athlete suffers a critical injury and suddenly their identity and purpose is thrown into disarray, I felt as if a chapter of my life was over. Fortunately, and evidently, I regained my speaking ability. And this personal ordeal gave me a profound appreciation for the remarkable gift of speech. My friends, we can use words. How incredibly lucky we are. Being unable to express ourselves or satisfy our own mind or to be understood is a suffocating and paralyzing condition. And in some distant way, I think that's most of us. I believe that there is something deeply incredible at every human being that's worth sharing with this world. Every person can have an articulate voice, even if now it only faintly cries out. To speak articulately is a form of athleticism like any sport. Those people you hear who navigate the complexities of language with the grace of a dancer or the precision of a surgeon understand a dozen or so important truths about speaking. Their ability to be effortlessly articulate and real on podcasts, interviews, or in person is the outcome of improving their relationship with language. And that is a path open to all. Anyone can use these methods to train their mouth to form articulate speech on command. That's what this program is, a training program for verbal athletes. A verbal athlete is someone who uses language flexibly and intelligently. And verbal athleticism currently is a book collecting dust on the shelves of society. We have forgotten what it means to engineer good sentences. Let's discuss the architecture of this program. Each lecture is designed to introduce you to a unique articulate concept, and each lecture will introduce an action item designed to apply what you have absorbed, because knowledge alone is not enough. Like an athlete, we have to engage in discipline practice repeatedly. During this program, you will be building a training plan for enriching your speech. The final lecture will consolidate everything into a short, potent routine to help you progress beyond the bounds of this program. Among other concepts, you'll be learning how to assemble an articulate vocabulary and retrieve those words at the right moments. How to expose yourself to rich language. If you engage with high amounts of great words and great ideas, great speech is the natural byproduct. How to prune empty language, filler words, workhorse words, and dead phrases from your speaking. How to ground your ideas in powerful themes like history's greatest voices. Understanding how our mind translates thoughts into words. Learn how movie characters compose articulate sentences effortlessly. How we can tune our voice so that what we say sounds weighty and worthy. How to add structure, beauty, and balance to your sentences. And the 10 rules of articulacy, the 10 modifications that will shape your selection of words. Over the duration of this program, we will refrain from delving into the intricacies of English grammar, syntax, or high academic teachings for literature. I could create 100 lectures on teaching participles, periodic sentences, split infinitives, run-on sentences, but I fear it wouldn't translate to your speaking. In the heat of conversation, the rules of grammar often recede to the background. We don't remember much in the spur of the moment, and articulate speakers are not applying excessive filtering on their language output. They have learned habits and patterns for their minds and mouths so that their default communication is articulate. That's how I've learned. Understanding eloquent patterns in language, practicing those patterns, leads to effortless, natural articulation. I want to discuss a few important habits that I would advise against during our time together. One is to avoid reading the resources in your head. Any material I recommend over the course of this program should be read aloud. It's essential that we activate our entire speaking apparatus, our tongue, our teeth, our jaw, when interacting with beautiful language. The dozens of resources that I've created for this program are designed to give you an active participation, so make an effort to read them aloud. Secondly, do not skip the action items. We humans have the proclivity to neglect exercise in any form with tremendous reluctance. It's easy to assume that the knowledge will automatically translate into conversation skills because you feel uniquely capable. Perhaps, if that's you, teach me your ways. But for most of us ordinary folk, we need the practice. And the action items are what makes this program more than just a long YouTube video. The brain doesn't learn through consumption, it learns through creation. And creation is hard, but it's rewarding. I would ask that you respect the timeline of this program. I advise against advancing until you've completed each action item. I know it's a tempting idea to binge all the material in a single day, but should you do that, it's unlikely you're going to improve your speaking. Modifying your speaking behaviors takes time and repetition, and I've designed this program at a cumulative pace where new concepts build on previous ones. My recommendation is 1 lecture per day, but you're welcome to work at your own pace. Finally, any modification you're going to make to your speech will sound and feel strange. You're going to fumble your way through new words and new speaking structures as you try them on for size. You're trying to alter one of the deepest behavioral patterns in your life, the way you've always spoken. And the roots of our communication are so deeply embedded for any small effort to produce a large effect. So don't be discouraged if you constantly revert to old speech patterns, or if new ones feel foreign and stifling. What feels fine is how you've always spoken, and I'm here to assure you that what feels alarmingly strange will probably sound quite good. And I promise that the new habit will become the one that feels the most familiar. Like any athletic movement, the more times you execute on the movement, the easier it becomes to repeat. Effortless, articulate speech can be yours with just a few weeks of good practice. I'll leave you with one of my favorite quotes from the British-American author Henry James. All life, therefore, comes back to the question of our speech, the medium through which we communicate with each other, for all life comes back to the question of our relations with each other. The way we say a thing, or fail to say it, fail to learn how to say it, has an importance in life that is impossible to overstate, a far-reaching importance as the very hinge of the relation of man to man. My friends, you stand at the threshold of a wonderful and wonder-filled world of words. I'm excited. Let's begin to shape a better world with our words. Over the course of my articulation journey, I've noticed a number of milestones that have marked distinct stages of progress in myself and in others. I've taken these milestones and put them into this diagram, which I call the articulate ascent. This represents the journey that you will go through in learning to speak well. As you gain experience and knowledge throughout this program, you will move up this chart. Each stage matures your understanding of what it means to speak well. And I want you to be aware of this process so that you don't have to remain at certain stages for too long or be there as long as I was. I had to begin this journey without a map and was therefore vulnerable to certain misconceptions about what good communication is. So let's talk through this together. Innocent ignorance. This is the everyday individual. You are aware of flaws in your sentence structure and word selection. Your speech is basic, unremarkable, and indistinct, reflecting a lack of conscious effort or awareness in communication. You're oblivious to the verbal artistry of the great speakers you watch. While you can appreciate profound speech, you are ignorant to the mechanics behind how words influence people. Normally, it takes watching a YouTube video on this topic, stumbling upon an article, hearing someone break down the mechanics of good communication, and then you make the transition to stage 2, the awakening call. Fillers, empty language, and redundancies in your speech become clear. Poor speech patterns you never noticed before are now obvious. Your verbal comfort is shaken, and there's no going back. Stutters, stumbles, and insecurities are glaring. You finally put a name to the verbal frustrations you've always felt but could not articulate. This heightened awareness of language is the start of your journey to more mindful and deliberate speaking. Stage 3, verbal rebranding. You start using creative and colorful language, giving your words personality. You realize progress is easy because most people don't even try. You make an effort to introduce new words and expressions into your speaking. This leads to the burden of compromise, where you struggle to adapt to simpler language, creating tension between your evolving speech and everyday social speak. It's at this stage where you begin receiving feedback on your new vocabulary choices. It is also at this stage that most people begin to experience the 3 modes of communication, which are expertise, expression, and extemporaneous. Expertise is where you speak on subject matter that you are the expert at. And it's expected that you would have refined your word choice and defined the right way to say something that leads to understanding with your listener. The second mode of communication is expression. Expression is raw and messy. It's often called social speak. This is the way that I would, if I met you, recreationally engage in conversation. I'm not taking inventory on every word that I'm saying. I am letting myself be more natural in my delivery because there is a raw, authentic realness that we're able to achieve when we allow ourselves the ability to make mistakes when we speak. And we're not able to be that genuine when we are in a sane and sober state of mind all the time. This is how relationships function. We should encourage the natural expression of who we are, and this is a future stage that we'll talk about here in just a moment. The third mode of communication is extemporaneous speaking. Extemporaneous is when you speak usually when there are stakes to what you say. If you are in a meeting, if you are delivering a pitch, giving a presentation, or negotiating, trying to convince someone, there is usually a right way that you can say something that will produce the desired outcome. There's a right way that you can respond to what someone says to you. Most people want verbal athleticism in this category. They want to be able to command environments where they are looking to extract a certain outcome and say things eloquently and confidently. And stage 3 is where people begin to experience that reality. Stage 4, the confidence catalyst. Positive feedback on your improved expression boosts your confidence. Realizing that speaking differently garners attention propels you further. This strengthens your competence as a speaker. People comment on certain words and phrases you use, highlighting your unique style and eloquence. However, this can be a double-edged sword, as not all attention is favorable. Some may find your language off-putting. This leads to stage 5, the perfection deception. Oh, how I remember being here. Your surge in confidence leads to hyper-consciousness. Your speech is overly polished and mechanical as you strive for an unrealistic standard of perfection. Ordinary words must be special words. You can't embrace common language and constantly rephrase ordinary sentences. Stage 6, natural expression. This is a callback to what I mentioned earlier with those 3 modes of communication. This is where most people should be, natural expression. You eventually embrace the freedom that perfection isn't necessary, finding joy in speaking naturally without restriction. You realize that not every scenario requires meticulously crafted words. In the past, you stifled part of yourself, which created an imbalance in your speaking. You now blend your enhanced vocabulary with genuine personality. You focus on clear and complete sentences, finding your natural flow and not overthinking your word choice. Stage 7, 8, and 9 are advanced stages of communication. Stage 7 is structural mastery. You finally understand that simplicity and clarity are more impactful than complexity. Your speech becomes organized and logical, focusing on clear explanations and coherent ideas. You begin understanding the power of rhetorical devices and can identify persuasive patterns in effective communication. Stage 8, simple eloquence. Your speech becomes effortlessly well-worded and simple. You can explain complex subjects without overly complicated phrases. Your sentences flow seamlessly, a result of extensive practice and refinement of your ideas, both in writing and in speaking. You've shed most of the fancy words and phrases, making your speech lean and clear. This simplicity makes your communication refreshing. Stage 9, the golden tongue. You are among the 1% of communicators. Every sentence you speak reflects natural elegance and simplicity. Your ideas flow logically and clearly, demonstrating an effortless mastery of language that captivates and engages your listeners. There's a rhythm and calming energy to your delivery. You distill ideas to their essence, having refined your thoughts through countless iterations. The underlying structures you once made great effort to use are now seamlessly woven into your sentences. You excel at formatting ideas into meaningful quotes that stir people at a deep level. I want to make a brief point here. When you do anything at a high level, such as speaking well, It demands a level of dedication that is not feasible for most people. This is why we don't pursue speaking like a stage 9 communicator, because most people will not be able to appreciate or apply the palette of benefits that come with speaking this way. And they lack the dedication and the time to make it happen. Most people who work a normal job are pressed for time. They don't want to study grammar too excessively at an 8th grade level. And that's why we don't need to speak like a stage 9 speaker, which I am not, by the way. I consider myself to be around a level 6 or a stage 6 with a clear awareness of what I need to do to improve. I often say that any authority that I have on this subject stems not from the fact that I somehow consider myself better than everyone else. I don't. It's that I was truly worse than all of you. I'm like a sports coach. I can't play the field better than the athletes themselves. However, through years of experience and study, I've been able to develop a taste and a pattern recognition for what good speaking is and the qualities that great speakers possess. This diagram is meant to represent the journey ahead as you and I both work together in ascending through the stages of articulacy. You can download this graph below, and we'll talk in the next lecture. The Greek philosopher Aristotle often evaluated an object or profession with respect to its telos, its purpose, end, or goal. The telos of a knife is to cut. A knife that does not cut well is not a good knife. The telos of a physician is health. A physician that does not work to heal patients is a poor physician. What is the telos of communication? The telos of communication is to further understanding between speaker and listener. That's it. Communication that fails to advance understanding is poor communication. It's noise, an audible splinter that festers and confuses. Every day you and I are communicating desires, thoughts, emotions, ideas through a particular arrangement of words. Those words blend together to produce an effect, and that effect can move mountains, minds, and mankind itself. The impact at our disposal is correlated with how well we seek to further understanding. Speaking articulately, learning to be athletic with language is only of value if it furthers this basic end. What good is stiff, complex language if no one can understand us? The telos of today's lecture is simple. My aim is for us to understand what speaking articulately is and is not. We'll begin by discussing how our mind organizes language, the architecture of our vocabulary. Each speaker of any language possesses a surface lexicon and a deep lexicon. The term lexicon refers to the collection of words you have some relationship with. Your surface lexicon are those 500 to 1,500 words with which you have the strongest and most steady relationship. These are the words that you unconsciously and effortlessly default to when you compose a sentence. Joseph, how was your day? My day was good. I didn't have to think about selecting those words. They oozed out of my mouth. They register in my surface lexicon and exist at the tip of my tongue because they are heard, read, spoken so often. The particular words in our surface lexicon are there because of our continuous interaction with them. Beneath your surface lexicon lies your deep lexicon. Your deep lexicon is made up of those 20,000 to 35,000 words you recognize but don't use. This number does vary depending on the language you're speaking, but the average adult native English speaker can recognize 20,000 to 35,000 unique words. We know this because you recognize nearly every word that articulate speakers employ. Take a listen to the following examples.
I take off and write out of a sense of desperate compulsion. I always write as if I just gotten my x-ray from the doctor on Monday, and he'd best check with the insurance man and see whether or not the house is free and clear. I always write with a sense of desperate urgency. Now, I don't think this is necessarily a preoccupation with my own demise.
It's likely that you understood every word used in those examples. Why then do we struggle to retrieve those same words when we compose sentences? Because those words don't register in our surface lexicon. We have not cultivated a meaningful relationship with them. While we may possess a handful of unique words in our surface lexicon that no one else uses, we all have our favorite words, the majority of words that our mouth retrieves from our mind are not precise or colorful. Most of what resides within easy reach are the dull and plain words that populate our surface lexicon. Before we progress further, I want to elaborate on two distinct terms that people often use interchangeably. Those words are vocabulary and fluency. Your vocabulary are those words you understand. This includes most of your surface and deep lexicons. It's rare for one to use words that they don't understand. Fluency refers to the words that you use. You're fluent with every word in your surface lexicon. Otherwise, it wouldn't be in your surface lexicon. Part of the telos of this program is to improve your fluency with words. And this doesn't require knowing more words. Otherwise, I'd ship you a dictionary and tell you to start reading. Fluency can be achieved by strengthening our relationship with vocabulary we already recognize. One of the qualities every articulate speaker possesses is an expansive surface lexicon. They have an intimate relationship with a great many words. Exactly how many words? Some months ago, I wanted to answer this question, and I decided to write a program that transcribed the public media appearances of Martin Luther King and 10 other great communicators. After tabulating their commonly used words, I ranked their surface lexicons by size. The average surface lexicon of these powerful speakers was only 500 to 1,000 words more than the average native adult English speaker. Although they employ words that for us are buried within our deep lexicons, they only possess fluency with approximately 500 to 1,000 more words than you and I. And this includes using ordinary words in extraordinary and creative ways. For example, the singer Frank Sinatra had said, "I was starving for affection, having been neglected for so long." Here, starved is used in a creative capacity to express a deep lack or deprivation of emotional needs. The speaker Simon Sinek had said, "Greed has become the cancer of modern society." Cancer is used creatively to describe a destructive and spreading force. Not only do powerful speakers possess a relationship with uncommon words, they also have a richer relationship with common words. They don't always prostitute ordinary words down to common meanings, and this fresh approach tickles a part of our brain that causes us to exclaim, "That's new." We call someone articulate who can bend the common boundaries of language. In fact, here's a graph that visualizes this. The horizontal axis measures how common to uncommon a word is. The vertical axis, how vague to precise a word is. Articulate words are those that fall within this radius. These are words that are precise, but not present in most surface lexicons, hence why they are uncommon. When a word is precise and used appropriately, it helps to advance understanding quicker than vague or outworn language. What we understand about articulacy is that it's not the size of the word that matters. Bigger words aren't better words. And in stating that, a vain part of me wants to pack that idea in a scholarly way, but I have to bridle my tongue and remind myself that the objective is understanding, and I will not sacrifice clarity for complexity, tempting though it may be. We don't use complex or obscure words because we can. We use them because they allow us to become more efficient at expressing our thought. One friend of mine used to say, "Don't let the thesaurus explode in your head and contaminate your sentences with word shrapnel." The English writer Stephen Fry called this a disease of the tongue, inflated nounism, as he says. Stephen had a rule: no words longer than 4 syllables. Anything beyond 4 syllables, he was convinced, would throw dust in the eyes of your listener. The more accomplished speakers use words in a way that complements their thoughts and ideas, not overshadows them. The writer George Orwell also had this to say about using advanced language when a simple word could work. Words like phenomenon, element, individual, objective, categorical, effective, Virtual, basic, primary, promote, constitute, exhibit, exploit, utilize, eliminate, liquidate are used to dress up simple statements and give an air of scientific impartiality to biased judgments. The result in general is an increase in slovenliness and vagueness. As we work through this program, we will spend time focusing on simplifying our speaking and pruning words that create complexity. We'll begin our work with the first action item of this lecture. As part of this program, I've created a library of resources that are an aggregate of the most articulate texts, videos, and audio that lives on the internet. The first I should like to introduce you to is the Speech Bank. This is a list of the most powerful speeches delivered in fictitious and non-fictitious events. Choose one speech from the Speech Bank to play through. You won't be watching the video. Instead, you will be silently reading the transcript alongside the audio. The transcript for each of these speeches is linked in the resource. This exercise is intended to introduce you to hearing lean, crisp sentences. You'll develop this skill yourself later in this program. In the pursuit of using words with more intention, we must begin listening to messages and material designed to be understood. After all, that should always be our telos when we speak. In 2016, there was a study conducted by Cornell University. Two groups of children, older and younger, were shown images of the following animals: a robin, an eagle, and a bear. Their task was to pair two of the animals together. The majority of the younger participants paired the robin with the eagle. When asked why, they replied they recognized the shared concept of birdness between the two by virtue of the word bird being in their vocabularies. The older kids gave a slightly different answer. They paired the eagle with the bear. They stated both were predators, and they had enough rhetorical awareness of the word to recognize predatory creatures. The older kids could see what the younger kids could not. Not because the younger children lacked intellect, but because they lacked a mature vocabulary. They had not been introduced to the word and world of predators. The study suggested that the knowledge of a single word can transform the way you perceive reality. We learn words not to say more, but to see more. Austrian philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein said, "The limits of language are the limits of your world." Imagine what cloudy, ephemeral ideas that are in our mind that we're not able to make concrete because our language is undeveloped or imprecise. This lecture will introduce you to a practice used by history's greatest speakers that allow them to be fluid and fresh with words. This practice is called the commonplace book. A commonplace book is a personal treasury of phrases, sayings, words, and wit that you wish to enhance your speaking with. Reverend Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy, Ronald Reagan, Benjamin Franklin, Carl Sagan, Simon Sinek all kept commonplace books, or word diaries, where they would pen down lines from poetry, scripture, conversation, or books that they read. Many of the commonplace books of world-class speakers still exist today, and what we find is that most of their articulate answers and artistic word choices used in interviews or conversations stem from their commonplace books. Many of us listen to the eloquence of Martin Luther King, the vivid imagery of Reagan, Muhammad Ali's unparalleled quickness, and marvel at their ability to retrieve obscure, precise words in the moment. One of my favorite speakers, Rod Serling, had said in an interview, "We're developing a new citizenry, one that will be very selective about cereals and automobiles, but won't be able to think." I used to think, how could someone jump from cereal to automobiles within the span of a second? My mind could never fathom being so quick or resourceful with words, until I stumble over that same phrase, cereal and automobiles, in Serling's writing, in several of his speeches, in other interviews. It was also in his commonplace book, or what he called his writer's diary. What we understand is that the verbal gymnastics we witness from others is the result of good preparation and good documentation of language that they find interesting. When you begin spending time learning language, whether it be the simple form of a new language or an advanced form of a familiar one, you quickly begin to encounter challenges with remembering. Remembering the right words. Remembering to say something in that beautifully compact way that you read in a book. It often feels as if we're attempting to carry a handful of water across the desert only to arrive at the other end with cracked, dry palms. Why is so much information lost in speech? As humans, we really don't have a lot of memory to work with, and great speakers realized this and took measures to extend their memory. The creation of a personal, central bank of words and phrases is needed. The speakers we mentioned all kept a physical commonplace book, much like this one. This is what I kept for many years. I eventually transposed this over to a Google document where I could easily make edits. This Google Doc template will be available below. It's my personal commonplace book. Do keep in mind that the contents are influenced by my beliefs and personal convictions, as yours should be. Before we detail the practices of creating a commonplace book, I want you to understand why having a record of articulate words is powerful. As we interface with the world, we often stumble upon words and phrases that tickle our brain in special ways. They resonate deeply with us, often evoking strong emotional or intellectual or personal connections. I call these resonant words. Resonant words or resonant phrases are different for every individual. For example, a few days ago I was listening to the eulogy of Bobby Kennedy, where a line was quoted from his Day of Affirmation speech that read, "The belief that there is nothing one man or one woman can do against the enormous array of the world's ills." Those last few words, the enormous array of the world's ills, made me feel something. And when words make me feel something, I react in two ways. Thank you, and what did you do to me? You have found a way to access a part of my emotions that I didn't know existed. How do you attain that key? How did you attain that key? I want to add that key to my commonplace book. And slowly, by finding enough resonant words, you begin to build up a storehouse of emotion. And this emotion surfaces in your speaking and leads to meaningful and spirited communication. A commonplace book is a collection of emotion. In the same way one might collect figurines or sports apparel, a commonplace book is a treasure house of verbal property that has meaning to you. And we already do this in some way with our vocabulary. Every word that we use is because we learned it from someone else. We recognize there was enough utility in knowing the word to use it. The opposite is also true. There are many sophisticated, complex words we've heard that we have no intent on knowing because we would never use them. And that's precisely why articulacy isn't about memorizing the thesaurus. It's not about the big words. It's about building a chest of verbal valuables that are valuable because you use them. The difference between you and elite communicators is because they have a system in place for mining and storing their gold. So let's get you started. The action item for this lecture is to create your commonplace book. There are three ways you can do this. One is to use a physical notebook, such as I did for years. I don't recommend this option for reasons that will soon breach, but if you do enjoy putting pen to paper, I'll leave a link below to a great notebook. Number two, the second option is to create a digital commonplace book. I use Google Docs to easily access this document between devices, but you can just as easily use Apple Notes, Notion, Obsidian, or any document syncing application. This Google template is linked below. Just make a copy and you can begin making your edits. Allow me to show you how I've outlined this document. This top section is a list of new words I'm actively merging into my vocabulary. Below this list is a table of workhorse words I'm attempting to replace in my speech. We'll talk about workhorse words in a future lecture. The other 13 pages are composed of categories of language that relate to various conversations and convictions I have. Quotes and proverbs, business, psychology, politics and media, religion, historical excerpts, life and motivation. The third option is to create an account with Nounce. Nounce is a tool I've created for myself to help design articulate speech. This is what I use currently as an alternative to my digital commonplace book. After you create an account, you can begin assembling your personal dictionary, also called a word bank, which is just another name for a commonplace book. You'll notice that my word bank has a similar architecture to the Google Doc I referenced. It's got tables, lists. Nounsel also allows you to practice retrieving your words and phrases from memory. You can select any category from your word bank, and a sentence will be generated based upon your words and phrases. Click record and deliver the sentence with the missing words included. As you use each word, Nounce tracks your progress so you understand how strong your connection is with those words and phrases. Nounce will be linked below if you wish to create a free account, which I highly recommend. I would suggest keeping your commonplace book easily accessible as you interact with written, audible, or spoken language during this program. You want to train yourself to be a magnet for these resonant words and phrases that can enrich your speaking. And they're everywhere. When you listen to podcasts, watch films, or read articles, there will be word combinations that will light a little language spark inside of you. And now we have a way of capturing that to supercharge your speaking. Watching content becomes an active process of enriching your language. And you might even begin with a few words you encounter in this program. As you begin building your commonplace book, I would extend 3 suggestions to you. 1, avoid adding whole sentences. My personal limit is no more than 10 words. Articulate conversations should be spontaneous and draw from the rich mosaic you've exposed yourself to. You don't want to be regurgitating memorized sentences. If what you say is memorized, that phraseology often becomes the only way you know how to communicate an idea. And this leads to speech that is stale and mechanized, and ultimately robs you of your ability to be verbally agile. When you memorize sentences, you slip your mind into a reduced state of consciousness, much like mindlessly repeating phrases in a church. You're not thinking about what you're saying. You're just repeating words. We'll speak at length on this later, but articulate speaking is about keeping our conscious mind engaged. It's one of the reasons why I avoid overly scripting videos. Your mind cannot be present or your mouth articulate when your focus is on repeating a phrase. Number 2, when reviewing your commonplace book, don't just read through your list of resonant words and phrases like a grocery list. The objective is not to memorize this list like one might for a vocabulary test, but to be able to practice with it in different contexts and conversations. And you grease these associative pathways by engaging in mock conversations with yourself using the word or phrase. For example, if the phrase is dawn a new day, I might say something like, every time it dawns a new day, I am grateful for life. And when it dawns a new day, I will remember that. I might think of several sentences. When your mind hears words in your own voice, you have an easier way activating it in your speech. Number 3, consider making an audio recording of your commonplace book. This is something I do with my phone so I can listen to it in the gym, when I'm driving, or doing work at home. One of the practices that will be emphasized repeatedly in this program is exposure to language on multiple sensory levels. It's not simply enough to silently read your words or speak them. You must also hear them so you remember them. One bonus technique I've used is screenshotting a word from my commonplace book and featuring that screenshot on my phone lock screen. This is an extra effort to keep those words at the forefront of my consciousness. How frequently should you review your commonplace book? Martin Luther King would review his daily, Benjamin Franklin on the weekends. I choose a section of my commonplace book to review 5 times a week, usually a section relevant to the events that I'll be involved in for that day. I spend 5 minutes working through one of my categories. We'll talk more about this at the end of this program when we discuss daily practice. But each time you exploit any word or phrase from your commonplace book in conversation, I want you to keep in mind that your brain is recording that instance of usage. In fact, according to this study, it takes using a phrase or word 38 unique times before it becomes unconscious in your speech. Once it reaches that stage, it enters your surface lexicon and becomes part of your verbal brand. The more you use a word, the quicker your brain defaults to using it. Remember this when you begin reviewing your commonplace book and are confused why it's difficult to recall its contents in conversation. It takes discipline to maintain and practice, but the effort doesn't take long to show results. You quickly begin to say things differently. And like the children identifying the animal images, you see things differently because you now have the language to explore and explain the world around you with greater meaning. And that's magical. The Chinese philosopher Confucius had a saying, "From music, you can tell what someone thinks, whether thoughts are corrupt, or virtuous. Our inputs provide a reasonably precise pulse on what our outputs might be. Show me someone who engages with articulate, creative, and intelligent language on a steady basis, and I will contend they bear the same qualities in their speech. The quality of our speech is a product of our language environments. If I had one statement to pass on to you about speaking articulately, it would be that. In the same way that we become the average of the friends and family we surround ourselves with, the books we read, the music we listen to, the videos we watch, the words you say, etch language patterns in your mind that surface in your speech. And since most people aren't articulate or thoughtful with words, you're constantly exposed to high doses of vague, vapid, and vulgar language. And we wonder why we speak that way. When we first learn language as children, we are learning 3 to 5 new words every day. And by adulthood, it takes a deliberate effort to expose ourselves to new and creative word combinations. Our surface lexicon, the assembly of words our mouth effortlessly defaults to, largely stops expanding after one finishes college. By that time, our communication patterns are set in stone, and the primary words that we'll use for the rest of our lives have been selected. In fact, the battle is preventing the shrinking of our surface lexicon. Think of your surface lexicon as an expanding and contracting circle, interacting with fresh word combinations, such as those you encounter in a book or in this program, temporarily expand the radius of that circle to usher in those newfound words. If those words are not put to use, they lose their place within the circle, as its nature is to contract only to include your most actively used words. This is why great speakers read profusely. There is no great wordsmith who does not strain and strive to expose themselves to new material that reflects how they want to communicate. When you immerse yourself in beauty and wonder, your language evolves to dispense those ideas. Our speaking becomes stagnant and stale when the flow of fresh and flavorful words is limited. This is a predicament for much of society. And so the task at hand is finding a method for keeping the language heart beating, pulsing, expanding, and fortifying our surface lexicon. The most transformative exercise I underwent was taking the time to define my language inputs. One day I sat down with a pen and paper and drafted a list of all the inputs of language that I exposed myself to for more than 10 minutes a day. It was my intent to discover how my vocabulary was being influenced. After making a list of all language sources, I proceeded to rate each on a scale of 1 to 10 on how articulate I considered each to be. What I realized was that I had little exposure to anything above a 5 in articulation. And a 5, for reference, is approximately the threshold of an average conversation held with a stranger. A 10 might be comparable to a rousing speech delivered by history's greatest orators. From this exercise, I realized that the content I was consuming, the conversations I was engaging in, the music I listened to were all below the articulate average of 5. I wasn't interacting with sources of language that used fresh words or communicated with any clarity. I'm going to introduce the action for this lecture so that you're aware of what we're going to attempt to improve for you. For this program, I've designed a worksheet that allows you to conduct the same diagnostic that I did on my own language sources for yours. You can find this worksheet linked below. My ask is that you spend a few minutes filling out the sheet with the predominant language inputs that you encounter for more than 10 minutes a day. You can use the ranking table here to approximate how articulate each language source is. After I performed this exercise for myself, I began making efforts to improve my language diet. This led me to create the 3x5 language diet. This is what I practice to this day. The 3x5 language diet consists of 3 5-minute sessions for a total of 15 minutes per day, focused on enriching your language. The first part is review. In order to prevent our surface lexicon from withering, we have to keep fresh vocabulary in our mind. The first 5 minutes is spent reviewing content from your word bank or commonplace book. For me, this consists of using nouns and practicing with a category of words. If you're able to speak aloud, you can also record your word bank using a voice notes app on your phone and listen to the recording as you drive, work out, or maintain life. The second part is rewatch. The next 5 minutes is spent listening to rich language. This includes speeches, conversations, or monologues from films. The purpose of this 5 minutes isn't to digest the substance of the information. It is to develop an awareness of the structure of their sentences and their spirit of delivery. Listening to powerful speakers repeatedly allows you to find subtle ways of modifying your speech for greater impact. Each time you unlock new patterns in their words that influence your own choice of words. I would suggest watching the same content 5 times before choosing new material. Each time you rewatch it, it builds a greater depth of understanding of the mechanics of why that speech is powerful, and that focuses your mind on fishing for new ways to analyze that delivery. Here's a list that I'll provide that boasts some of the most intelligent and articulate speeches on the internet. Part 3 is recite. The final 5 minutes includes reciting poetry aloud with the intent of learning rhythm and cadence. The essence of articulate expression lies not in the expansiveness of one's lexicon, but in understanding rhythm and cadence, which is the very heartbeat of language. Your speaking apparatus, your mouth, your teeth, your tongue, your jaw need to know what it feels like to say beautiful sounding sentences. To begin your exposure to poetry, here's a list. As with the speeches, start at the top. Now you might be asking, Joseph, how does the 3x5 language diet fit into the fabric of my week? Am I practicing this every day? I make this a regular fixture in my life 3 days a week, Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. And at this point, it's far longer than 15 minutes, but that's because I find it enjoyable. I suggest making this routine regular enough for it to become a major source of language in your life. It might not hold a candle to a film with a 2-hour-long runtime, but if you do it multiple times a week with high intensity, it will quickly influence your speech. The harsh truth is, you cannot expect to speak extraordinarily when your inputs are ordinary. We forget that there are patterns within everything that can only be acquired by doing more than just performance. When athletes train, for example, they don't simply engage in the physical act of their sport. They immerse themselves in a broader spectrum of activities. They study sport-related films, absorbing commentary, scrutinizing their own and competitors' performances. They consume what is relevant to their success. That's what sets them apart from average athletes. And this, applied to your verbal athleticism, will elevate you above average speakers. There are patterns in language, intonation, word choice, that we unconsciously adopt by virtue of hearing them from the mouths of others. Consider Martin Luther King. When he delivers a sentence effortlessly with eloquence, a sentence that dances and twists and enumerates in points of 3, all wrapped in a poetic flair, it's a window into the inputs that he encounters. When someone speaks articulately, they're displaying the patterns they've exposed themselves to. Let me read you something. The following is an excerpt from the legendary writer Gary Provost. This sentence has 5 words. Here are 5 more words. 5-word sentences are fun, but several together become monotonous. Listen to what is happening. The writing is getting boring. The sound of it drones. It's like a stuck record. The ear demands variety. Now listen. I vary the sentence and I create music. Music. The writing sings. It has a pleasant rhythm, a lilt, a harmony. I use short sentences, and I use sentences of medium length. And sometimes, when I'm certain the reader is rested, I will engage him with a sentence of considerable length, a sentence that burns with energy and builds with all the impetus of a crescendo, the roll of the drums, the crash of the cymbals, sounds that say, listen to this, it is important. When excerpts like Gary's are composed in raw moments, and they are, the speaker is not thinking about the framework of their sentences, the length of their lines. I'm going to deliver a short sentence, and then one of longer length, and then one of medium length. No. Their articulation flows into these forms of eloquence and elegance with the effortless grace of an athlete, executing a leap, connecting with the ball, or crossing the end zone. It isn't through any conscious effort, but it's the natural outcome of ingrained practice. It's become part of their bloodstream. The first step to speaking in this manner is to understand your language inputs. Complete the worksheet below, and we'll talk in the next lecture.